The World Tomorrow. The Worldwide Church of God presents Herbert W. Armstrong.
He said, God is going to do a new thing among the people of God, even in the Crusade Church of God in Russellville, something like he has never done before.
And I'm here to bring you the truth, because you don't hear this from any other voice. No one else is telling you the things that God is telling you through me. He's speaking through me.
Now, I want to say something. Some of you know, some of you may not, because the Lord actually spoke it out loud. And it had told me so many times since then, and I've witnessed it, I've experienced it, that we've been battling a high principality called pretense, a demon called pretense.
And there has been many, many false churches. Jesus said, I will build my church. He didn't say, I will build my churches. But there is a true church that is undeceived.
The Lord let me experience what it is to be a new bride. You know, I'm not worried about what I'm about to say, though it may be graphic. We're coming to the Lord, and if you can take it, beyond the veil is the chamber. That's the wedding chamber. The Lord told me that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cult Next Door podcast. I am Mattie Lassiter, as always, joined by my sister, Ashleigh Teeter. Today, we're going to kind of do a little bit of a different thing. We've done this once before. We're going to do kind of a Q&A before we pick back up with the story next week and the following weeks. We've got some really great guests lined up for that to talk more about the love movement and all of that, kind of how that devolved, if you will. But today we're just going to do the Q&A. So if you're new to the podcast, welcome. I know we've got quite a few new people from our episodes on Was I in a Cult? So thank you for following the podcast. If you are not following the podcast and you're just listening, go and follow us real quick. And those of you who are followers of the podcast but don't know, Ashleigh and I both had separate episodes on a podcast called Was I in a Cult? So go check them out. They're on Apple, Spotify, everywhere that you're going to listen. I thought they were really great episodes. That's a lie. I didn't even listen to it.
I listened to it and it's fantastic. So everybody go listen. But that is your homework for tonight, is to listen to your podcast episode.
Yeah. And then also, if you are not yet, go and follow us on our socials. We've got Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. So go follow us there. We've got a lot of reels and posts that we do there that I think is some really good content. And then also, if you haven't already, one thing that absolutely will help us a lot is to go give us a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever it is that you listen. Go rate and review the podcast. That helps a ton in helping us get some more exposure, and hopefully it can get out to some more people and help more people hear the podcast, and hopefully it'll help them like it's helped others, and frankly, like it's helped us to do it. So yeah, again, like go rate and review. If you have a second, even pause this and go do it now if you can. But anyway, we're going to jump right into it. I think we've got a handful of questions here. So we'll start off with the first one. It's a doozy from a friend. It says, do you think Larry and the young single mother from the church that we talked about named Sasha have listened to the podcast? Ashleigh, what's your take?
My guess is absolutely. I mean, I would have a morbid curiosity myself if I knew there was a podcast out there that included me or was all about me, as it is the case with Dad. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know how. I have a thought that maybe Dad does not listen to every single one of them, and I know we've talked about that before, but I think for sure that she probably is. I think they're definitely aware of what's being said.
Yeah, that's what I think. I know that they are aware and that Dad's aware for certain.
Yeah.
I don't know that they are avid listeners. If you are, hello. Hello, and I'm glad that you're
here. Get the help that you need.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I'm glad you're listening, but you should spend your time doing something else.
Yes.
But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they do, or I think to your point earlier, whether they do now or not, they definitely did at some point. When I say they, I mean Sasha and her daughter, Alex, as we call her. I think they probably have listen to
Yeah.
enough to be mad about it, which is fine.
Yeah, and to be honest, like I don't know that we've touched on this that much. Obviously, we've talked about Sasha and we've talked about Dad. These are two adults who are engaging in behavior that has been really destructive and hurtful to other people. However, I do not know her personally, but I know that Dad is a cult leader. He is someone who exercises an extreme amount of control over people. He uses manipulation tactics to stay in control of people. And I do have a hard time viewing her as equally culpable in this. And so I feel for her, honestly, because I think she is a victim of this in a sense. And I think, what I would love to happen is that she listened to this and something rings true to her that, maybe I'm being manipulated. Maybe this is not this reciprocal, loving thing I think it is. It's very clear to me what it is.
And then the second half of this question, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that Dad and Sasha had a relationship following the fall of the church?
Well, they had a relationship during all of it. It's kind of like what Blake said, whether it was physical or not, that's really beside the point. He was dating her. It was an emotional affair at the very, very least. And so I really don't ever think about that. Like, did that go a step further? I have no idea. I assume, just based on what I know, that the emotional component of this continues.
Yeah, if the question, I think it could be answered a few different ways. If the question is, do they have a relationship like the one that they had? I think probably yes, or some form of it. Do I think that it escalated into a full out relationship? That I have no clue. I have no idea, but I wouldn't doubt it.
Mm-mm.
But I don't know that, and that's fine by me.
Well said.
All right, question number 2. How have you all grown mentally, emotionally, etc. since getting out? I'd love to hear the positive that has come out of allowing yourself to leave and heal. So I know we've already kind of touched on some of this a little bit already in some episodes, but I'll just kind of recap for myself. In the 4 years since I've left, which is coming right up on 4 years in mid-August, I've done more growth in those 4 years than the previous years all combined, for certain. In some ways, obviously I could wish that I was never in that environment, but it also, made me who I am. And in some ways it's kind of interesting too, because it becomes like a cliche, but the whole idea, like I'm a survivor kind of thing, but that I can say that.
But you are.
When I think about things that I'm going through in my life, I'll look back to that and be like, oh, I can get through this. I can handle this.
Yes.
I've been through some stuff. I think I can deal. So there is value in that. Again, not that I would wish the things I went through or others that were in Crusade or worldwide to, I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but there is still value in that. And so I kind of try to cling to that when thinking about my experiences.
Yeah, I think similarly for me, probably the biggest gift that came from it, and again, it sounds weird to say gift, but I have looked at it that way, same as you said, for a really long time now. If all of those things hadn't happened, where would I be today? Where I'm at today is a direct result of where I've been. And so I think the biggest thing that came out of it for me was critical thinking. because we didn't critically think when we were in the cult or we were in our family. There's one external source that is dictating to us what we think, how we feel. We are always measuring ourselves against the standard that is external to ourselves, and leaving, it's like you're kind of, adrift in the middle of the ocean on a raft by yourself. That's what it feels like. At least it did for me. And so it's like, oh, I don't have anything external to lean on or reach out to right now. This is going to have to come from within. And that really started me on a path of critically thinking about literally every aspect of my life. Why do I believe what I believe? What do I believe? What do I even base belief on? Because that's a whole thing in and of itself. And so I think that has been the best part of it to me, is when you're able to critically think, then you really are able to live more authentically, because you are living true to what? True to yourself. You are determining what works for you, and then you are living that. And that's not something that we were ever afforded before. And so I feel like that just equals freedom. And the freedom is the biggest gift that came out of it ultimately. And so for me, just like you, I, will look back and say, I wish this didn't happen. And I wish that you and I weren't separated for all those years. Like, that still hurts. And that's still sad. But, we are making the best of it now. And we're living fuller lives now than we would be if we had remained in contact and in the cult together all these years. So this is more real.
Yeah. And something you kind of touched on, it hit me, like the self-reliance part, where not to make this sound as a negative or, for those who are listeners that are believers, but for me, this is just for me, kind of when I came to where I am now in how I believe, I feel like it was important for me, the thought that, oh, no one's coming to save me. I got to do it. Like, if I want my life to be this way, like, I can't just wait for something to happen. Like, I've got to do it. And that has been huge for me. Like, take charge and like, oh, this is how I want my life to be. Let me pursue it, not just sit back and think about how I want that to be. Let me go look for it. Yeah. So that has been very important for me.
Yeah, agency.
Yeah.
That gave us agency.
Question number 3, what is it like to be so close after being estranged for 25 years? Ashleigh? Oh, she's trying to pass it off on me first. Well, in a nutshell, I'd say it's super rad. It's super cool. No, I mean, we've talked about it a little bit. Like, there's kind of a vibe of like trying to make up for lost time. And some of it, you can't get back. But I feel like it almost, because of that, makes it a little bit more precious that we now have the opportunity and the, like you were mentioning earlier, like the agency. It's not as it was before with any other relationship where this is allowed until it's not, because that's how it was with every relationship. It's good unless someone in control says it's not. So now with that being gone, like, it can be open and honest in the way that it was supposed to have been always. But, like, it still obviously hurts for there to have been that gap for all of us for all that time. But I mean, there's only so much you can do about that and just move forward from there.
Yeah, I agree. And it is like, I think because I'm your older sister and because you were so little when I left, there is that, I carried that longing and that grief for so long. I think I don't want to say this in a way like you didn't, but you were so little. Like, you know what I mean? I probably was not like forefront of your mind after a couple of years. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like for me, you were like frozen in my mind as like this 6-7-year-old child, and that was obviously very painful. And so now that we're establishing, growing a relationship again, the bond is still there, but I'm getting to know you all over like a brand new person, because you are not anything like you were when you were 6. No, I'm sure you are some, but it's like, it's just, it's like bittersweet, I guess is the word sometimes, because especially like if I hear stories and things that happened like when I wasn't there, when you were growing up, that's like so hard to hear, because like I see you as this, capable man now, but I always revert back in my head to the little boy, and I'm like, oh my God, like I wish I had been there. Like I wish, that you didn't go through those things by yourself in a sense.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah.
This moment brought to you by Larry.
That's right. Yeah. But it is good, even if it's bittersweet sometimes.
Question number 4. How old are you and each sibling currently? So I am 35 and dying more every day. And Ashleigh pleads the 5th. And
yes,
you guys can figure it out.
And I thought you were going to say you were 4. Because, because that is that's your post-cult age, and that's when life actually really started.
Yeah, I am 3 years, 11 months, which explains a lot.
Growing every day.
Yeah, but my physical body is dying every day.
Something to look forward to, everyone.
Yeah. It's only downhill from here. No, that's not true. That's not true. Question number 5 is, what do you miss? And I'm assuming that they mean like, what do you miss about maybe a good thing about the church or cult life?
Yeah.
And then I think for me, probably, which I think I've heard this so many different times from people in similar backgrounds, or even people who were just, believers who maybe aren't now, the community part, I think is probably the main thing. And then on piggybacking on that, like the music, I was a musician and got to play in the band, and like I miss that. And of course that's not contained to the cult or the church, but that was an avenue that I had to be able to play regularly with people. And I really loved that. And so now I'm just like a bedroom warrior with my big giant guitar amp and, all this stuff in there that's way overkill. So I do miss that part. And then again, back to like just the community part, like you've got, for better or worse, you've got a grouping of people that you're really close to. And that in a lot of ways can be really nice. Like every Saturday night, Liz and I would have, a group of people over and fill up the house, and we would watch a movie, and we would cook food or order a bunch of pizzas. And like, I loved that kind of like the entertaining and that kind of stuff, with friends. So I'd miss that part, I think, but all the rest of it, it can go to hell.
I think this is a little bit different for me. In the beginning, I would say it was community, because I did not have a single friend really outside of it. But and I think I talked about this before. I joined a running club to try to replace community that I lost through church. And I'm so far removed from that time period now that, I guess I would just say for people who who are just coming out and who are finding themselves without community and missing that and longing for that. There are so many ways to create community. It does take effort and it does take a little work. Like, that wasn't super comfortable for me to go to this runners club when I didn't know a single person there, and I'm not an extroverted person, so it was not the easiest thing, but I made some lasting friendships in that group. I mean, that was like 15 years ago, and I'm still very close with a lot of those people. But yeah, I think community is always one of the main reasons why people stay in cults too, or high control groups. And I used to always miss the feast.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever the first, fall day would come and there would be that little bit of crisp, coolness in the air, I would think of the Feast of Tabernacles. But, I've since discovered that you can go on vacation for 8 to 10 days and not go to church every day for hours.
Yeah.
So.
Wait, what? No, I don't think that's right.
So I'm digging the churchless vacations. Those are the only ones that we had growing up. I mean, even after I married Kurt, even our honeymoon was at a feast. So every day, for a 2-hour service, and then you're having a potluck or whatever. You're with these church people and you're having to get up early in the morning and get dressed and
happy anniversary, honey. Here's some crock pot chicken. It's delicious cream corn out of the crock pot. No, for the feast for me, it used to be that way. I loved the feast. Mm-hmm. I would get feast fever. We called it. Feast fever. Oh yeah. But then that wore off for me over the last several years because it just became, we've talked about some of it, but the other part of it that we haven't talked about as much is that it really became like a huge amount of work for me. Like, we took everything. So I think that kind of wore on me and took the shine off of it a little bit, because the feast would come around and I'd be like, yay. Oh, wait, I got to take all this stuff. I remember I would look at the calendar for when the feast was going to be, and, it would fall on different days, every year. And we had a stretch there for a while that was Saturday to Saturday, which was the best. Because if it's not Saturday to Saturday, say it's a Thursday to Thursday, we're taking everything. It ends Thursday, and then you have Friday to go from wherever you're keeping the feast with all the gear, which for the most part, we were keeping it in Arkansas. So, a little bit easier, but you got to load everything up, take it back to the church building in Russellville, set everything back up perfectly, sound check, all that stuff just on your own. I think it was me and Liz and maybe a couple other people that would help, but I would go through and check every single mic and signal and make sure it was all set up correctly, because we're going to have services Saturday morning and it's got to work correctly, or that's going to be bad for me. So that part got to where it was ooh, if I would see a feast that fell kind of in a danger zone of when we get back and had to unload and set everything back up, I would just stress about that. Oh. So that kind of knocked the shine off of the feast for me.
Yeah, and also you guys were going to a campground, which I understand is beautiful, but part of the draw of the feast was going places far away or places you wouldn't normally get to go.
Going to the beach or the mountains or something.
Yeah. So, but that also has its drawbacks, because you can be somewhere really cool, but you can't really explore it, because 2 of the days of the week, of the feast are holy days, and those are double service days. So you're in church all day long. And then if a Sabbath is falling in the middle of that, you can't do anything but go to church and then go home and rest. And so it's not like you can go explore. You never even have a full day to do that. So, I'm so glad to to just go on vacation and not have to worry about it. I don't bring one pair of high heels.
Second part of this question is, what was the most beneficial takeaway? I think you already hit on that a little bit, which for me, it probably is learning how, it sounds really funny at 35 years old, but learning how to make friends. Mm-hmm. And it not be like, here are your friends in the group. Like, you don't have that anymore. So you got to go figure out how to make friends with mutual interest. And then I feel like you can have some really rich relationships because it's not just based on, oh, we're both here. Yeah. And I have still some really great friendships that were in that. Mm-hmm. So I'm grateful in that way. But, when you're able to go seek out people that you just jive with, like, you can have a different kind of relationship and vibe with those people. And I think that for me has probably been the most beneficial thing to learn since leaving overall.
Yeah, I would echo that too. And also, in the church, there were certain groups of people that we weren't really even allowed to have friendships with. We haven't really touched on that much, but, speaking about the LGBTQ community, mm-hmm. and I love that, like, the world is open. We can have friends with anybody we want. There are no prerequisites. It's not like, what is your sexual orientation? What is your faith?
Your political party.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we can have friendships, build relationships just on the merits of the person. And that is invaluable.
I lost track of which question this is. I think it's 6. If it's not, whatever. What do you think of the people that stayed? This is probably, you can answer it too.
No, probably just you.
Probably more for me. You didn't know any of them, really. You knew a handful of them. That's a complex question, probably with a complex answer. I love a lot of those people. I actually don't know who has stayed up till now. I'm not certain. I think there are a handful. For those, I guess I can break this kind of into 2 parts. For those that stayed longer than I did, like, I'm still friends with some of those people. I don't blame them because I know the atmosphere, the control, like, I get it. Mm-hmm. And also, I think Blake touched on it. We had some insight into things that maybe other people outside of the family or the inner circle, so to speak, didn't have. So I can't really blame people for staying when all that they're hearing is from this side. You know what I mean? So I guess that's a really long roundabout way to answer the question, but I don't think ill of those people. And even the people that are there now, like, I don't hate them. I don't have ill will towards them. I wish that they would get out, because I think what you touched on earlier in talking about Sasha, like, she is a victim. We can't forget that. Those people that were there and that stayed now, like, they are also victims. Yeah. So I feel for them in that way. So I don't think ill of them. I just wish that they would get loose if they haven't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Question number 7. Is Larry formally educated? No.
Next question.
Yeah, no, he's not. And that's no slight against him. I'm not.
Yeah.
But no, he isn't. And he, didn't go to, a theology school or any of that stuff, but no formal education or anything like that. Yeah.
Okay, so someone asked, what was the dynamic between Sasha and your mom like, and Sasha and the siblings like, at the time that your dad was trying to force Sasha on the family?
Again, another complex question with a complex answer. I think the short of it probably is that I felt like there were 2 very different and distinct approaches to it by Sasha. And again, this is just from the outside looking in, the best as I could tell. There was the, without sounding derogatory, kind of like a wounded puppy kind of mode that she would get in, where I feel like it was almost like she maybe wasn't comfortable with the position Dad was putting her in, kind of down on herself. Just, I think you can kind of imagine with that imagery of a wounded animal kind of thing. And then there seemed to be a flip side to that, which was the complete opposite, which was almost an entitlement to it, which I think she would oscillate between those two. And as far as her dynamic with Mom, I think that same thing holds true generally for their relationship.
Like, she was aware that Mom was struggling incredibly with this, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'll mention also, just so that I and the rest of the kids knew that there was no ambiguity about it, that they definitely would know, I wrote a letter that I delivered to Sasha and to Alex when all of this really, at the end, after we had left and things were genuinely terrible. Because at this point, Mom is still in the house with Dad. They are still there in that dynamic. And of course, it's as bad as it ever was for Mom, or worse. So I wrote a letter. Essentially, I mean, the long and the short of it is just telling them to piss off.
Mm-hmm.
Like, stop. Like, I'm telling you, this is what this is doing to our mom.
Yeah.
In case you did not know, this is what's happening. I'm asking you to go away from her in this situation. Like, I don't care what you do with Dad. Do whatever you want. Like, stop bringing your mess over into Mom's sphere, because she's not going to be able to take much more.
No, and I mean, there was the fear of her having another seizure, another set of seizures as a result of the stress, which is what brought it on to begin with.
Yeah, I was going to say there's negative doubt that that's a huge factor in what brought that on. So for me and the rest of the family, it's like, well, if this is going to continue, like, I'm going to say something so that there's no misunderstanding about how we all feel and about how Mom feels. And of course, they loved that letter. I think I even heard something since then about how it, at least one of them, I can't speak for both of them, but Alex, the daughter, that it was threatening, which I'm happy at some point to read that on the air. It was not threatening. The only threat that was in there was essentially that if you are going to continue, and this is what I meant by it, if you're going to continue this, like, we're going to seek whatever legal avenue we need to get a restraining order, whatever. If you're really insistent on keeping yourself in this circumstance with Mom, I don't care what they did with Dad. Do whatever you want. But if Mom's here and she already had these multiple seizures in large part because of what Dad was doing with these two.
I mean, to speak to this just blew my mind and made me so angry that Mom was in the hospital, with, recovering from the seizures. And then did Dad not come pick her up with Alex in tow in the car, which was like an hour and a half drive home that Mom had to endure?
After just coming to from multiple seizures and being out of it. Like, it's that kind of thing. Like, I can't speak to what they were thinking at the time or how they felt. I don't think that they're completely callous people, but that to all of us was like, what is how she feels about this. Yeah. And you seemingly don't care.
Right.
You just don't. You think you're so in the right with the nonsense that Dad has been spouting into your head for all this time that you can look at Mom, like when you saw her, you saw that she was like a shell. We all saw that. They have eyeballs too.
Yeah.
And for me, that was just like, man, that makes it very complex in how I view them, which I think I've worked through some of that since, but like, that's difficult.
Oh yeah.
To think about, but
I think it's important to note as well, and someone touched on this, maybe it was David, that Sasha has a formal diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. And so I think that probably explains some of what you're talking about when you talk about her behavior of oscillating between like a wounded animal and then like defiance, because that, push-pull kind of thing, and the being really open and loving and then being like really spiteful and angry, those are the polarizations of borderline personality disorder. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. And also, knowing that, and I think we should have a whole episode about this, because I think it's really fascinating how people with narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder oftentimes find each other. And when they commingle, it can be absolutely explosive. But the borderline person goes through these cycles of like idealization and then devaluation. And so it's very hot and cold. But when they're in that hot spot, they are giving the narcissist everything they could ever want. And so that makes a lot of sense to me that dad would be drawn to her, especially when she's in that kind of space. And then when she's in the devaluing part of that dynamic, I can't speak to this as a psychologist, so I would love to have somebody on that could. But I could imagine that, he would be wanting to restore that so he could get that feedback.
Well, and we've mentioned before, but Dad loved a project.
Yeah.
That was something about him. So we kind of had thought about this in those terms.
Yeah.
Like, you're either getting possibly the best supply you've ever had from this person, or you've got a project to work on to get that back. So I think it was just like the perfect storm there.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned earlier, I've got the letter that I wrote. I probably won't keep all this in because it's a little long, but I'll go ahead and read some bits of this. This is a letter that I, on behalf of like the rest of the kids and mom, wrote and delivered to Sasha and Alex. To Sasha and Alex, we're writing this letter to ensure that you both are informed about the things that have taken place and continue to take place in the lives of our parents, but above all, this being written as an appeal. We understand that you both are aware, at least in part, of the damage that has come along with the relationship that the both of you have had with our father. We think it's important to state the obvious at this point. You are not members of this family. That's not a slight or insult to either of you. It's just simply the truth, and it's important to start this off with a firm footing in reality. This isn't something we have any strong desire to point out, except for the simple fact that much of what our mom is dealing with stems directly from that relationship dynamic that has been artificially created. That has been used to control you both and has been used as a weapon in so many ways. Knowing what we knew about the stress she was experiencing, the seizures didn't come as a huge surprise. Despite Dad's assertion that she's been brainwashed to feel this way, we can tell you with certainty that she's felt this way about these relationships from the start. As a result, she's experienced extreme mental anguish and weight loss, among other things. Put yourselves in her shoes and imagine what she must feel every day when she wakes up. She feels replaced in her 48-year marriage. She feels like her children have been replaced by whoever is most convenient. The physical manifestation of these things in her body aren't so surprising when this is taken into account. We think it's also important to note that her feelings of replacement are more than reasonable given what has happened over these past few years. We don't hold any contempt or hatred towards either of you. You were both taken advantage of in truly incredible ways. That said, we do hate the effect that your actions, in conjunction with Dad's, are continuing to have on our mom, such as stepping into her home unannounced, calling Dad into the evening hours, staying at the church building, i.e. their home well into the evening, etc. These things are having incredibly negative effects that are manifesting physically. If these are things you intend to keep doing, you can invite Dad to your apartment. Their home is no longer an option. Although this is changing for the good, Mom is still unable to fully speak her mind and say how she feels. So this is an appeal on her behalf. If you truly have any love for her, any respect for her marriage, and any decency or compassion, you'll step away. There are those beyond reasoning with, but I sincerely hope and pray that neither of you fall into that category. This letter is the first, and we hope the last step in doing what we can to protect Mom's health and safety, and we're prepared to do more if and when that becomes necessary. We understand that much of this letter will come off as very pointed and aggressive, but the goal here is peace. Peace for Mom, peace for our family, and peace for both of you as well. Sincerely, Treon's children.
I think that's really good.
Yeah. And
Excellent.
I did that, I should note, pre-Chat GPT. I can write, so whatever.
Take that.
Yeah, I didn't need it.
And they didn't do a damn thing different, did they?
No, not at all. Nothing changed. And their response to that, I think they both sent me some text about it, pretty defiant. And Alex, I think, was saying like, well, I didn't know that this woman that I called, grandmother felt this way, that kind of thing.
Well, now you do.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like now there's no misunderstanding, like,
Right.
And of course the behavior did not change. And, in some ways it's interesting because that is what led Mom to go ahead and finally remove herself from that situation. So in some ways, like, I'm glad, which
Yeah,
I think
me
her
too.
knowing that I delivered that letter to them was also helpful in that way.
Mm-hmm.
They're not unaware at all. They know, and no change in behavior for months after that. So I think that was helpful in Mom saying like, okay, this is only going to get worse. Never going to change for the better for me.
And yeah. And also, like, I would have hated for them to actually back away and then that caused Mom to stay in a terrible situation because Dad wasn't doing any changing. And that's who really needed to be changing. Okay. This is either number 8 or
Or
a
we don't
different
know.
number.
Yeah, some other, just figure it out.
Do you see yourself ever attending another church in the future? If no, what would be the reason why besides the obvious past experience you had at Crusade Church?
Well, I'm really getting into the Church of Satan these days. No, I'm kidding.
The occult.
Yeah. No, I don't see myself going to a church. I don't have an aversion to, like you might see in the movies, like an aversion to entering a church building or anything like that. Like that doesn't scare me. But no, I cringe at the thought, and I'm sorry to people who are listening who are believers and go weekly. That no shade, but I cringe at the thought of going to a church again, almost for anything, even like for a wedding. It would be like, this is creepy. And obviously, like my experience in Crusade plays into that a lot, but that I don't think at all, maybe I'm naive, I don't think that is at all the overriding factor for where I stand in my current belief. There's the idea of like the church hurt and that's why people leave. Maybe they do. That certainly wasn't for me why I am where I am. And I'm not going to go into detail about it here. That's for another podcast episode. But I think for me, those two things were separate. It just allowed me, I think what you said earlier, Ashleigh, that experience and removing myself from it allowed me to look at everything very critically and just openly, like, what do I believe? What resonates with me? What doesn't? What doesn't seem true? What does? And really look at things honestly. And so that is why I am where I am. And that's, changing as I grow and move along. But no, I don't think that the Crusade experience is what put me where I am, but it was the catalyst to let me grow into what I actually think and believe.
So, like you, I do not ever see myself attending another church. And I would echo what you said as well. It's not because I was hurt in a prior organization. I actually have issue with people who box it in like that.
It's a reduction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And it's very, I know they don't mean it, but it feels insulting. It's like, oh, you just can't cope with the trauma that you experienced from this past thing. And I remember people saying, we just need to find you a good church, that kind of thing. And it's just like, no, actually, for years, like in the beginning, I didn't want to be out of church. I was desperately trying to figure out how to keep parts of my life. I didn't want the cult aspect of it, but there's familiarity there in like being a part of a group and everybody having a certain set of beliefs. But, ultimately, like we talked about, the critical thinking and just really taking a very close look at everything. I think because we grew up being told what to believe, we were completely duped in every possible way. Like it's going to take a lot more for me to buy into something now. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's actually a strength. But like, I'm going to need data. I'm going to need facts. I'm going to need to know that I know before I'm going to put myself in another position like that. And I think the biggest thing for me now is that I am totally okay with not knowing everything and not having all the answers, because for years we thought we had all of the answers and we found safety in that. And now I realize, it's totally okay. How in the world would I, as a human being, have all the answers? And I don't think anybody does. And so I feel very comfortable in that. I go back to the basics. I want to be a good person. I want to love people. I want to treat people well. I want to do what I can in the world to help people and share my own gifts. And that has got to be good enough. And it is good enough for me.
In the church, there are things that you're obviously expected to believe and just take as they're said. But then there's also this undercurrent of you're supposed to prove and reprove what you believe. And so upon leaving, like Liz and I both, I think a lot of us that left, you go on a journey to do that very thing. Like these things that I've been taught, let me really look at all of these. And for me, even entering it, I wasn't too scared because I thought, if this is true, it will hold up. If it's not, then I lose nothing because it wasn't real.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is, if it's particular beliefs in our, worldwide offshoot church or Christianity as a whole, whatever it is, like I wasn't worried about that because that was what we were taught, which you're supposed to do this kind of the apologetics kind of point of view. Like, let's look at this then. And if it can hold up to the pressure, if it can stand on its own 2 feet, then great. Then that's something I can hold on to. And so that's what I did. And frankly, kind of have done since, which obviously that's kind of almost like the scientific method. It's not really just contained to Christianity or religion. If you look at these things and you examine. And for me, it's just, I kind of got to the point to where this sounds silly maybe, but I'm only going to hold on to things that I actually believe.
Right.
Not that I'm supposed to. Like, do I believe this thing? Because otherwise, like, if I'm holding on to it, then that's not honest.
No.
And what's the point in that?
No.
So that's kind of been the journey for me, is like, let me look at all of this stuff. What do I actually believe about whatever this is? And that's what I'm going to do, is what I actually think is true and what I believe genuinely.
Yeah. Okay. So next week we'll be back with another special guest where we'll get to talk more in depth about the famous love move.
The wonderful love move cannot be stopped. Fire emoji.
Infinity.
Yeah. Cow. Well, we're going to get to the bottom of what that cow emoji
people are
meant.
probably like, what the hell are they talking about?
too.
Because I think Blake said that last time.
Yeah.
All the emojis.
Yeah,
But
that was Dad's favorite when he would send a message full of God's wisdom. He would end it with a fire emoji, infinity emoji, a bunch of other stuff, a turtle, a cow. Who knows what it means.
I know. I need a breakdown of what each of these symbolized.
Yeah, we need a symbologist. Yeah, we'll be
if
back.
you're a symbologist.
Yeah, hit us up, please. But we'll be back next week. Like I said at the opening of the show, I demand that everyone go follow us on our socials and, follow the podcast on Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen. And then please, I'm going to ask once more, I come to you for your help. Please give us a review and a rating on Apple or Spotify or where iHeart, Amazon, whatever, wherever you listen. It really is helpful in kind of moving us up and getting a little bit more exposure. So if you enjoy the podcast and you want other people to see it and enjoy it, please just take a second, do that for us. Don't give us if you want to give us a 1-star, don't. Only 5s. The 1-star people, you can not do that. But 5-star folks, yes, please go and do that for us.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, bye.
If you like this episode of The Cult Next Door, please leave us a positive review and rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And don't forget to subscribe to be notified of new episodes.